So for those of you who were not logged in from the very beginning of the workshop, my name is Dr.Justine Scerri Herrera, and I am a managing partner of MK Fintech Partners, MK, which stands for Michael Cipriano, which is an international legal advisory firm with offices in Cyprus, Kiev, London, Dubai, Greece, and Malta. Also in Cyprus, we're quite large. I believe there are over 200 employees. We're about the second or third largest. I'm also an advisory member to the think tank, which is a digital economy task force set up by the Ministry of Finance, a part of the government of Malta, where I advise the government along with other members how and which innovative technologies to leverage and use in the public sector. So the pandemic has reminded us that we are all indeed, a part of something bigger. With all these forced lockdowns and forced breaks from traveling, this has kind of taught us to stop and rethink the way we work, the way we live, the way we invest, the way we travel. So in a way, the virus has sort of distorted our perceived freedoms and has actually restricted us in so many ways. Many actually think that COVID could be a sort of wake-up call for businesses, for governments, for consumers, and for every single person around the world. Because basically what has really revealed is that our markets and our supply chains are so fragile and so easily disrupted. And this is why I have opened with a quote, the pandemic has reminded us that we are all as part of something bigger. Because we truly are all very connected. Unfortunately, due to some of these disruptions, the long-term value and profits of many shareholders around the world have either started to diminish or will continue to diminish due to some disruption associated with either employees or customers or supply chains or governments or society at large. So due to these disruptions, we will see the intrinsic value of so many companies we already know of today decrease and continue to decrease. So is there a solution? What is the way forward? Basically, since we are all so connected, is probably the reason why the virus has spread so rapidly, so fast. So we definitely need to see a more global, more connected response. So food for thought, has the pandemic caused people's social consciousness to kind of wake up? And on a more positive note, could the silver lining be that post-COVID, we will see a more sustainable, a more inclusive, circular society and world at large? So what are some of the effects, the short and the long-term socio-economic effects that the virus and these disruptions have brought about? Firstly, definitely working from home. So all businesses have imposed working from home policies, working remotely, which resulted in less commuting and less costs, since no office costs, no equipment costs. Also, on a larger scale, we're seeing certain companies like Germany actually implement and draft a bill which will give people the legal right to choose if they want to work from home. So this, of course, is very progressive, and it would be really nice if other jurisdictions actually follow suit as well. Also, in a study conducted by Wall Street, around 60% of CEOs have stated that they will continue to encourage working remote. Of course, they will see the benefits in terms of less pollution and, of course, a better work-life balance when it comes to family. So basically, the point of me saying this is that these conditions are really going to set the tone for how companies will operate in the future. Another area which was undoubtedly affected is travel. So we're seeing borders opening and closing, quarantine rules changing all the time. So our freedom of movement has totally been restricted and affected. Also, for a long-term kind of effect of this is that people, especially businessmen, might not see it really worth it to waste such a large carbon footprint to travel the other side of the world for a very short meeting and endure, jet lag and endure all these uncomfortable effects. So also long term, it will decrease the desire to move around so much. Also, people are getting used to, using Zoom and holding all these meetings and conferences online. And thirdly, one other area which was definitely impacted is e-commerce. So businesses all around the world had to shift to digital and digitize overnight, or simply be left behind or just replaced altogether. Of course, this was very, very challenging. Some businesses did not have good websites, weren't user-friendly, payment integration, especially in cash-based societies, delivery services, certain operational aspects and IT aspects. So this was very, very challenging. And also when it comes to smaller scale businesses or more local kind of businesses, investing and going digital was actually seen as a cost and not really as a long-term investment. So even this mindset was sort of problematic in certain places. And when I say many companies have, digitized and shifted, we're literally speaking about the whole spectrum from e-learning to telemedicine to digital banking to e-signatures. So it is really a worldwide movement. And obviously, as Simon mentioned, the demand for certain services such as Amazon have skyrocketed. I think they have employed about 180,000 people in just the first quarter of 2020 alone, which shows that the expectations of consumers and behaviors are drastically changing. And operators and businesses need to also change to keep up with such consumer demands. And of course, once societies and consumers move forward, they do not move backward. So these trends are not temporary or short-term. They are actually real long-term kind of behaviors and attitudes. So this is really going to change the way we operate and react from now on. So in a way, the pandemic has forced us into a fast forward of at least 5 years or could be more. And that is why I put, I'm sure many of you know, the classic film Back to the Future. So in order for us to keep up with these consumer demands, we are witnessing a sharp rise of fintech and other innovative solutions and technologies such as decentralized finance, RegTech, blockchain, crypto, and all this in the realm of green and sustainable. Of course, on the other end of the spectrum, as a consequence, we are seeing that there is a sharp decline of revenue of traditional companies. The WHO stated that there will be a decrease of about 25 to 30% worldwide of global dividends. And also, as I'm sure most of you know who the Royal Dutch Shell Company are, they have cut their dividends for the first time in 80 years. Which of course is a very historical turning point. So what does this really show us? This shows us that humanity is moving towards greener and more sustainable, since the once popular commodities like oil are being replaced by cobalt because of electric cars, by hydrogen, which is highly efficient to decarbonize carbon emitting activities. So we are really moving towards the sustainable living in parallel towards a tech-driven society. Also, notably here, which is worth mentioning, just in case there are any investment managers in the audience, the EU has even drafted legal reforms for fund managers to integrate these sustainable risks and include them in certain investment legislation like MiFID II. And they have also proposed an EU sustainable taxonomy regulation. So the purpose of this EU taxonomy is basically designed to help investors and companies and issuers transition to a more climate resilient economy, and basically to provide a kind of standard and common language when it comes to what activities are actually sustainable. So this EU taxonomy actually sets performance thresholds to help parties identify the environmentally friendly activities. And basically, it states that they need to make a substantive contribution to a list of certain factors. So it could be climate mitigation, protecting biodiversity, sustainable resources, marine resources. So they will impose on companies for them to basically make use, or indirect or direct, of sustaining the economy. of course, it's a huge move forward. Probably the reason of them implementing this so quickly is to be able to close the gap and actually reach some of the 2015 Paris agreements on climate change and the SDG UN goals, which are to reach 40% and to cut down 40% gases by 2030 and hopefully by 2050 reach a net zero emission goal. So basically, in order to achieve these goals, you really need to require for investors to invest in a new low carbon infrastructure and technologies. So, greener buildings, electric cars, wind energy, climate action, and so forth. So basically, in a nutshell, we are moving towards a digital economy and a more sustainable economy. Now, going back to how COVID has impacted and will impact businesses, although most businesses had continuity emergency plans in place, none of them could have definitely expected or predicted a pandemic. And of course, the overnight changes which they had to make in order to survive the pandemic. So companies' main focuses during COVID in order to survive were revenue protection and customer retention. Over here, I have posted the normal life cycle of a company. So most companies' growth decline and do not make it to the other end of the curve because they do not reinvent themselves. They are not innovative, they reach their growth and they don't have their eyes on the competitors and they just start to decline because they're not keeping up. So one company which actually made it towards the other end of the curve is Netflix. So Netflix actually started out by making DVDs way back when, and they actually transformed into offering digital entertainment. So they actually made it towards the other end of the curve, which is not very common. And underneath, in comparison to the normal S-curve, we have the pandemic S-curve. So as you can see, due to social distancing and lockdown measures, the certain trends were highly accelerated to keep up with consumer demands. So especially in the realm of banking, for example, access to banking, we saw a lot of digital new fintech products and projects take off. There's Werex, Monzo, Revolut. So all these companies became kind of the go-to if they needed fast banking. Of course, certain apps like Zoom and Slack and others, boomed. So, for example, Zoom is actually not Zoom, sorry, DocuSign, which is an e-signatures company, is a company which has been around from 2003, but many probably think it's quite new just because it was so quickly adopted overnight. So we're seeing a sort of shift, an accelerated shift of trends of all these digital companies. Now, over here, CB Insights have posted a top FinTech 250 companies for the year 2020. As you can see, they come from a wide array of different spectrums, so from accounting to capital markets to crypto to payments to lending. And these are companies Europe, outside Europe, US, Asia, all over the world. All these companies have raised over 49 billion across about 900 deals. And these are definitely companies to look out for because so in 2018, 2 years ago, CB Insights posted a top FinTech 250. And from all these companies, none of them have died. 10 have gone public, 13 were acquired. Many have moved on to raise more money, more funding. So these could be the next, the next unicorns of the next century. Another very important, prominent type technology, which has practically grown a pair of legs in COVID times, is blockchain technology. This technology has been adopted by governments all around the world, by big banks, including JP Morgan, by a lot of day-to-day businesses. Probably the reason for its accelerated kind of widespread adoption in COVID is the disruption of supply chains. So as I said earlier, we are realizing how fragmented society is and how disconnected the world actually is, and because of the disruption of these supply chains. Now, since blockchain technology is a technology which is suited to validate, secure, and transmit data all in a decentralized fashion, this actually came in handy and solved some very, very big problems, even COVID-related problems, and provided some great solutions. So, for example, there are some transactions which include multiple parties. And this network allows us to go from a sort of chess game scenario to a plug-in and play scenario, which was very effective. So, for example, some practical examples and blockchain highlights are, firstly, many countries use the technology to monitor the infected number of the virus in individuals. And some governments have actually went ultra. So, for example, like China, they have leveraged WeChat due to their large consumer base, and they have leveraged WeChat in order to use a sort of QR code on the app, which became a sort of badge of health. Of course, there might be some offshoot other problems like privacy, but I will not delve into it. Another area which blockchain proved to be very, very prominent is trade finance. So trade is the lifeblood of the modern global economy. So each year we see hundreds and trillions of dollars in goods, in assets, in money, in credit, in support of global trade. Unfortunately, the WHO stated that trade could decline by 20 to 30% due to these disrupted trade and supply chains. And on this note, there have been some really, really good blockchain companies and projects which have created some solutions in this regard. There is a network called the Marco Polo Network, where a group of blockchain companies like R3, Corda, Trade9 came together to provide a solution to kind of improve the inefficient, disconnected current systems and when it comes to trade flows, because there are multiple parties involved, multiple trading relationships, supply chains. And what they did is they shortened and helped reorganize these chains. Also, when it comes to supply chains, we have issues of trust and issues of security, which are two key areas which blockchain can come in handy. So just to give you a kind of example of a successful transaction which happened on the Marco Polo network is last year there was a German exporter of glass tubes which exported these glass tubes to a Thai manufacturer through the Bangkok Bank and the Commerce Bank, and this transaction was super successful and super instant. There are other successful trade transactions, I won't go into them. And this network actually has a prominent amount of players involved, from Microsoft to MasterCard to IBM to Bank of America. So there are about 30 listed companies which together help provide these solutions. Also, we're seeing a lot of very important partnerships. So the WHO and IBM, Marco Polo and MasterCard, JP Morgan acquiring Consensus after using its Quorum software. Also in the area of decentralized finance. So Simon touched up a bit about decentralized finance when speaking about security tokens. Basically, this is kind of slowly creating a new ecosystem for the way we do finance. In some countries, for example, in Germany, making bonds in a token form like Bitbond are actually becoming quite popular with banks. There are also some secondary markets which are moving towards setting up exchanges, security token exchanges, and hopefully eventually we'll have some liquidity to complement the primary market security token economy, which is environment, which is up and coming. Also, we have companies like Chainlink who basically are there to provide the solution to the Oracle problem, which is to put off-chain data on-chain via APIs in order to create a sort of interoperable system, because all these systems need to be connected and work together. So if there's a lot of off-chain data, they need to be put on-chain. And of course, we're seeing a lot of movements in the crypto world. Now the market cap of crypto is about 280 billion. Some of the most popular ones, of course, are BTC and Ethereum. And why is this? Why are we really, investing heavily in crypto all of a sudden? So some people could see crypto as a sort of safe haven. Could be because of what happened in 2008, the financial crisis. Could be because of inflation. So we're seeing negative interest rates of a lot of banks all around the world, especially in China, not in China, in Germany, sorry. So because of these inflation rates, many big banks, including, for example, JP Morgan, are actually keeping some of their reserves in Bitcoin, which is quite ironic because we had in the past, you know, the banks versus crypto, and now the banks are adopting blockchain and actually putting some of their reserves in crypto. So that's actually quite interesting. And also another reason that it's moving quite fast now is that there's the industry is being validated through many jurisdictions actually regulating the space. So we are seeing, so Malta already has regulation, and now finally after 2 years we have some crypto companies which have been granted a license. Of course, Switzerland, Estonia, even though they had some fallbacks with their licensing procedure. And also, as of more recently, we have companies like UK, Germany, and Hong Kong who basically stated that any crypto operators in those countries need to either regulate, apply for a license, or register their companies. So things are really moving across a board, a number of jurisdictions. Also, we're seeing movements in the central bank digital coins. So as some of you might have heard, China has launched its central bank digital coin system. The ECB are also trying to implement this central bank digital coin system. This is probably because of Libra, which is attached to Facebook, and Facebook has 2.7 billion users. So basically, banks feel that their bread and butter, which is money and ultimately control, is at risk. And of course, this is why we are accelerating. Also, big players like PayPal have adopted crypto. So all in all, we're moving quite fast. So where are we heading? Now that I have given a sort of macro overview of where the world is heading, I think it is safe to say, firstly, we are heading towards building digital economies. Secondly, we are moving towards building digital economies which are interoperable, so away from fragmentation and towards connectivity. And thirdly, all this in the realm of maintaining a sustainable environment. So due to these new sustainabilities and green agendas, we are probably likely to see cleaner forms of transportation and infrastructure, which of course is positive. And this of course is going to have a roll-on effect into investing and the underlying assets of funds. So we're going to see a lot of ESG, environmental, social and governance investing. So we're going to moving away from oil and airlines and traditional stocks and heading towards certain metals such as gold and cobalt, and even tech companies, pharma companies. In fact, in just 2020 alone, we have seen nearly 15 billion investments in ESG funds. And in fact, over here, I have just put up a list of the top 10 performers. And if you can see, their underlying assets are some precious metals, technology, pharma. So we are moving in that direction. Now I'd just like to spend a few minutes speaking about Malta's regulatory landscape. So if any of you are planning on setting up a business or applying for a certain type of license, Malta is definitely a good jurisdiction, a part of the EU, to contend for these purposes. So I have broken down the landscape into three main parts. So for financial services and fintech, Malta is home to the country with the third most financial services license granted. So the third most popular destination for EMIs and PIs. Also, our regulator is very hands-on and has also launched 2 sandboxes, one for fintech and one for blockchain, so startups can actually test their products. Secondly, in terms of crypto, Malta had drafted the very first virtual financial asset regulation and framework 2 years ago. So over the last 2 years, if any of you are in the crypto industry or are familiar with, we received negative comments because our regulator is slow and we took so long. However, in hindsight, because of what's happening in other jurisdictions, I'm actually grateful that they took long to understand and learn all the different aspects of this new technology before granting a license, because now we have sound institutions which can call Malta at home. We also have some very big names such as Microsoft, Exante, which is a top-tier investment firm, global. We have IBM, Tipico, which is a gaming company, Credarax, which is a payment acquirer, Lufthansa, and many others. And then in the third realm, we have the investment services licenses. So Malta's home to around 600 funds. We have 180 AIFs, 350 PIFs, 100 UCITS, with a total net asset valuation of 15 billion euros. So, of course, when it comes to funds, Malta is a destination of choice from a tax perspective. So on prescribed funds, prescribed funds, if most assets are in Malta, it's 15% on those assets, but 0% for non-residents and residents investments, so no tax. And then for non-prescribed funds, if 85% of the assets are outside Malta, there is 0% tax on income, on gains, and on distributions. So those are the three main kind of sectors which I work and advise and set up licenses in. And what are some ancillary benefits of setting up in Malta? Of course, we have the English language. So if you're dealing with a regulator, a CSP, a bank, whoever, everything is in English. We're a part of the EU, so you could transport your services and activities to all other 27 states. We have an open and friendly regulator. Of course, applying for a license sometimes is like a short-term marriage. It could be up to 1 year, so it's nice to actually deal with friendly regulators. When it comes to tax, we have effective 5% corporate tax on dividends for non-resident shareholders and 0% tax on holding companies for non-resident shareholders after the relevant tax rebates. Funds tax, as I have already given you an overview. Also in terms of residency, if you set up a license in Malta, you can apply for a key employee initiative residency. So if you're a director or a key official, it is easy to get residency on this basis. Of course, in terms of passport, I'll mention the elephant in the room, perhaps, that recently we got some negative light and feedback from the EU because of our passport scheme. And due to that, we have made some new requirements, which primarily includes that you have to be a resident for at least 1 year to be eligible for the scheme in order to not cut ties or have bad relationships with the EU. Some other factors include good education. We also have international schools. There's an abundance of property, which actually, speaking about the property market, in the last month has increased by about 20%. And also, which I would like to mention, is the 300 days of sunshine. We have very good quality of life. It's just a nice place to live all year round, not being biased. And lastly, a quote from some of our foreign companies following a survey which was conducted by some of the top 4 in Malta. 80% of foreign companies based in Malta stated that they expect to still be here in 10 years' time. And of course, this is positive because from an economic standpoint, 12% from our GDP depends on financial services and investment services firms being here, and about 15% on gaming operators, which run in the hundreds as well. And notably, which is, I think, relevant to mention, how is Malta doing post-COVID? So this is a statistic from earlier on this year from the IMF, and they basically have stated that Malta's economy will be the least impacted and will recover the fastest, which obviously is very good news. Malta has one of the strongest economic support packages post-COVID in the world. So, of course, tax deferrals, bank moratoriums, retail spending vouchers, wage supplements, which covered the basic wages of about 90,000 employees working for about 16,000 businesses, which resulted in a very, very marginal increase in unemployment. Some other initiatives were that the Ministry of Finance has granted up to 200,000 to startups offering viable tech-based solutions, such as Trust Stamp. So it's trying to attract these fintech techie players to Malta in the light of this digital economy agenda. So as a statistic, Malta's spending package equated to around 22% of Malta's economy, which is higher than most states all around the world. So that's it from me, your moderator. I really hope I provided some valuable insights. Feel free to get in touch. My contact details are on this screen. I hope you enjoyed the rest of the conference.